the majority rate of change in majority. So it has
Majority, yeah.
fallen in Myanmar. Buddhists have fallen. In India, Hindus have fallen. In Nepal, Hindus have fallen. Look at Pakistan, the majority, which is Muslims, has risen by 4%. And look at Bangladesh. Muslim population has risen by almost 19%. So this is what is the result of all this conversion, killing, pushing out. This is the result.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the WAC Indian History Podcast. I'm Utkarsh, coming to you from Singapore.
Namaste, welcome back. Sumedha from Switzerland.
Well, it's been quite the tumultuous week, has it not?
Yes, indeed.
We thought that the US was having, it was like a movie show with the debate and the election, and the shooting, mis-shooting, all of that. And then we have such a significant development right here in the Indian subcontinent.
A tragic one indeed, Utkarsh, in many ways, a very tragic one. In the, for the US, we can actually laugh at it like a joke. But in Bangladesh, I'm afraid I'm not laughing because it's a very tragic situation. It's too close to home, and it's an unfolding tragedy. It's a genocide. So I'm so glad that you picked this topic to talk about today because I am full of it. I am just, and I am in touch with so many people and know so many people who are directly in touch with people in Bangladesh. So the attacks against Hindus especially, and their very, very pitiable situation is something that the world should sit up and notice.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a good segue. As it's obvious, I'm sure to the audience, we will talk about Bangladesh and also the historical context of that part of the world. But I thought I'll just frame it in 2 or 3 things that I was curious about as we approach this conversation. The first one that I'm very curious about is when we look at the concentration, right, of, say, pre-independence India, right? It kind of made sense to me that the area that is Pakistan today, that had a higher Muslim population because it's closer to where Islam came from. But I'm very curious, how was there a concentration in where Bengal is, where Bangladesh is? That's the first question I had. I'm sure that historical context may also help with the second question, both explaining a little bit of today. But in general, I have always known Bengal as an area where there's always been a lot of activity. And I'm sad to say, often there's been a lot of violence, right?
Yes.
That's kind of what I associate with Bengal.
You've lived in Bengal for a very long time, Utkarsh. Maybe you've seen some of it also yourself.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, not much, nothing in particular to report that dramatic, but still, it's something that's
but I remember you were there in Gujarat in 2002, weren't you?
Yes. Gujarat was a very direct experience. I had to write my ICSE exams in the middle of the riots.
Yes.
So that's a different thing we can talk about in the appropriate episode. But Bengal, not so much. But what I can say is it was always in the air, or it was in the ground of the place. You knew that there's a certain, what's the word for it? I don't want to say seriousness, but there's a certain depth to the feel of Bengal. Of living in Bengal, I feel that's a little bit different from some other places. So that's the second part of it. And linking to this, I would just love to understand the history of this part of the world, both where it came from. I mean, of course, studying in India, I learned about the partition of Bengal, 1905, all of that, the shifting of the capital from Calcutta to Delhi around the same period. But before that, and of course, we have to talk about the original conquest of the British, right? Battle of Plassey, everything. But I want to go a little bit further back to understand that part of India and that part of the world a little bit better, because it is a very populous part of the world. It is a very fertile place.
Populous, very populous. Yes.
So it's a little bit unfortunate that it's associated with such tragedy, particularly in recent history. So those are the 3 things I thought you could take it from wherever you prefer.
Well, you said you wanted to go right back. And I'm going to oblige you. When you ask me to go back into history, it's like a red rag to a bull. if I can say that.
Yeah. So
So you will
we
find
kick
me
out the
rushing
time
straight
machine.
back.
We take the time machine and we
Yeah.
roll it back as far back as it goes.
Yes, it goes beep, beep, beep and stops where? It'll stop at Harappa. It'll stop at the Harappan civilization. And
Okay, let's
for
go there.
those who have not seen our 3 episodes on Harappa, you must, because that's where I'll start from. That's where are the roots of Vedic civilization. And we have argued extensively and with so much evidence in 3 of our episodes. So, do you remember the place in Bardwan, which is in Bengal, which is called Pandur Raja Dibi? I had mentioned it during our 3 episodes as the oldest easternmost outpost of the Harappan Empire. And where
Yes,
is that?
yes.
That's in Bengal. It's in Bardwan
Okay.
district of Bengal. And it is at least about 4,000 years old, the second millennium BCE. So you
Mm-hmm.
see, that's how rooted Bengal and Bangladesh, the area, was, and I use the word advisedly. I can't say is, but it was that rooted in the Indic world. That's where we began from, through the Vedic age, through which is the Vedic Harappan age, then the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. Then when we come to actual history, which we read as history in the history books, as in the Mauryans, the Guptas, etc. Bengal as Bang, Pondr, God, it has been a very important part of this whole Indic setup. So,
Mm-hmm.
Utkarsh, would you like to see a few maps? Would that help?
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
a few names. So let me try and share. There is this very detailed map of the ancient world, of ancient South Asia, done by
Okay.
Schwarzberg. So it's a very expensive book, but thankfully a free version is available on the internet. So I am going to open that and show you
Okay.
the place of Bang and the place of Pondr in the Indic scheme of things. So let me try and share it. So just give me a minute.
Yep, sure.
So can you see this Schwarzberg Atlas?
Yes, I can see it.
Now, it does not let me actually give you full page. So let me just try to magnify the relevant parts. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just try to magnify the relevant parts. Okay. So now you do recognize that this is the eastern part of India.
Yeah.
This is the place where the Ganges falls into the Bay of Bengal.
Correct.
And can you see where my mouse is? You can see Vang
Yeah.
and you can see Pondra.
Yeah.
Okay. So these are the references as they appear in the Vedic corpus. So the
Okay.
oldest names of this area of the Indic world, the oldest name was Vang or Bang. Then there
Mm-hmm.
was Pondra. And you have to connect it with the Harappan civilization. And remember that we spoke about the maritime trade of the Harappan civilization. And you see where Vanga is, it's right on the mouth of the sea. So there's
Mm-hmm.
always been a lot of maritime trade associated with it. There's always been comings and goings from different parts of the country and different parts of the world. At one point of time, actually, it was from here to Sri Lanka was the shortest way you could reach Sri Lanka via the Bay of Bengal. So that
Okay.
was the way the waterways used to run.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is the Vedic period. Okay, let's move on to. Now we move on to this is the Mahabharata. Okay, this is a map which is based on the Mahabharata. So let's take a look at that. So there we see again the same Vang. Can you see Vang? Can you see Pondra? Yes, you can see both of them. And you will
Yeah.
also see another place which is called Suhma. That is also one
Yeah.
of the old names of this area. Another one is Samtat. That is another old name of this place. And look at
Okay.
this little place called Tamra Lipti, Utkarsh. Tamra Lipti was one of the most important ports of this area for thousands of years. And it is
What's
still,
it called today?
no, Tamralipti does not exist today.
Doesn't
Tamralipti
exist.
doesn't, no,
Okay.
it doesn't exist today. So it's
Okay.
not called anything, but you know that we have so many ports around that area.
Mm-hmm.
So the ports still exist, but that particular Tamra Lipti does not exist today in its same form as it was. But it
Okay.
is a very important port of ancient India. Now,
Okay.
whenever we look at anything Indic, what do? We or the peoples of the past always wanted to identify themselves with the Mahabharata. So even when we
Hmm.
were looking at Tibet, remember there was a story about how actually it was one of the Kauravas who ran
Yeah.
away
The
and who
99th one
actually,
versus the
yes,
100th.
yes. And he was the one who established the Tibetan people. So
Hmm.
similarly, in any part of the subcontinent or Southeast Asia, you will have links to the Mahabharata. Now, what was the
Hmm.
story of Vanga and Pondra? So Vanga and Pondra were both part of the whole alliance of kings with the
Hmm.
Kauravas. So they were part of the Kuru Sena, not the
Okay.
Pandavas. Okay, so they were not on the
Hmm.
right side of history at that time. So they were with the
Hmm.
Kauravas. And Vanga was finally conquered by Bhim, and Pondra
Okay.
was finally captured by Arjun.
Okay.
So these two have these two Pandavas associated with them, these two names as their conquerors. And it is
Okay.
also said that all the kings of these areas were the descendants of King Vali. Now, this is not the same Vali as the one in the Ramayana. Okay, this is a different
Okay.
one. So, but they were all said to be descendants of King Vali, but they were
Hmm.
conquered by the Pandavas. So that is Bhim
Hmm.
and that is also Arjun.
Hmm.
Now, just want you to see one or two other things. This is the Mahabharata. Now we will go on to this is again, you see the name Vang will keep coming up as we are moving through time. So we are
Hmm.
moving forward. We are now in 325. So that is the Janpad area. That is the time of the Mahajanpads, the 16
Hmm.
Mahajanpad time. And you have the same name here, which you can see. You can see Vang over here. Vang and Pond still there, right? And
Hmm.
Pondra is the important city in Pondra was Pondravardhan. And this Pondravardhan was very important during the Mauryan period also. So let's go on to the
Hmm.
Mauryan period. Here we are
Hmm.
in the Mauryan period, as revealed by the Arthashastra.
Okay.
So there you see Vang, Pondra, God. God is another one of the names of Bengal. And I want you
Hmm.
to look at this cotton, silk, and woolen fabrics were very important products of this area. And they remain so. In fact,
Hmm.
I'm wearing this sari in honor of this episode. What is this? This is a Dhakai muslin. Let me just stop
Hmm.
sharing for a minute and I want people to look at this, to see this. I am wearing a Dhakai muslin sari. And the quality and the artistry of this piece of textile from this area has been famous for literally thousands of years. This was the place where this whole sari could be passed through a ring. So if I took off a ring and wanted to pass the sari through this ring,
Hmm.
it was possible.
Hey,
The
that
muslin was
reminds me,
so
wasn't
fine.
there this fabric called what's it called? Muslin.
Muslin, yes, this is Dhakai
Muslin,
muslin.
right?
Muslin is a
Is
form of very fine cotton. This is
is
Dhakai
that
muslin.
okay? So it's muslin, right?
Yes, this is
I
Dhakai
thought it was
muslin.
mythical that it's so thin that it can
No, no,
pass
no,
through.
no,
It's
it's
not
not a myth.
mythical.
No, it was
Okay.
actually so finely
I
woven
shouldn't get my
and the
information
cotton
from
was so
BBC.
fine. Oh, no. Utkarsh, you're saying this just to provoke me, right? I can see from the smile on your
That's
face.
where I read it. No, they talked about this fabric, and it was all the rage in your Bridgertons and all of those folks
Yeah. No,
because it was
so
that good.
yeah, muslin was it was loved by the Brits and the Europeans.
Yeah.
And Utkarsh, it was, also called chins, etc. And we
Hmm.
must do an
Tense.
episode
Yeah.
on that. We have to do an episode on chins and the way it conquered the world, but it made
Yeah.
India into a colony. So we will do an episode on that. However, I'm
Okay.
talking about the time when the Brits were not even monkeys on trees probably at the time, because this is far, far, far before
Hmm. Hmm.
any civilization came to the British Islands. So muslin has been famous through all that. And there's another thing, Utkarsh, you've lived in Calcutta. People there are famous for their artistry, for their, even their terracotta. And I don't have it on hand, but I would like to show you some examples of Mauryan Sunga period terracotta from this same area. So you
Okay.
see, it is in the genes of the people. This artistry with textile, this artistry with terracotta, it is in the genes of the people. And hopefully we'll try and insert a couple of beautiful Chandraketugarh. So during Mauryan times, the important city here was Mahasthan, Pundranagar, Chandraketugarh. These were the places during Mauryan times.
Okay.
And they were very much part of the whole empire, part of Bharat. And surprisingly or interestingly, we have found many inscriptions in these places, which, in fact, one of the only and the first stone inscription has been found in Masthan. So we have found examples of the script, we have found inscriptions, but let me not get carried away by the Mauryans. I am very likely to just hang on to them. So let me just move on.
Okay.
The Mauryans, the Guptas, the Palas, the Senas, all of these came to this part of the country and they ruled over it as time rolled by. Now, these were all Hindu kings. Today, that area is 91% Muslim. So, how did that happen? I think, wasn't that your second question?
Yes.
So, what happened, of course, was the invasion of the Muslims around the 9th, 10th century. So, you're right that they came from the northwest, but then they entered into the country and they kept on pushing more and more forward. So in the 13th century, it was in fact Bakhtiyar Khilji who was the first one to reach and to conquer parts of Bengal. That is the 13th century. And it is from there that the Islamic history of Bengal begins. Although, because there were ports, for example, Chittagong was a very important port, and we have some Arabic mentions of the Chittagong port as some kind of interaction between Arab traders and Bengal. But Bakhtiyar Khilji came and he just conquered the place. The first place which fell was called Navadvip. It is now called Nadia. It was a very important Hindu center of the Senas, but it fell. So then began the conversion. The conversion was in 3-4 ways. One was by the sword, because obviously, whether you read the Secret Diary of Tipu Sultan or whether you read Babar Nama or whether you read what Timur said, they had all come to spread Islam by the sword. If for the people, for the colonizers from Europe, it was gold, God, and glory, it was not much different. For the Muslims, they were spreading Islam with the Quran in one hand and sword in the other. So that was one simple reason, because Utkarsh, the question that you have asked is a question which has been asked by historians again, and again. And there is a plethora of literature on this. So many people have their own theories about what happened. The main causes which are given are, one is, of course, conversion by force, which was a very common practice of the Islamic hordes which came in from the northwest. The other second thing which was very interesting was the role of Sufis. I will go into it in a bit. But the third thing, again, I want to connect up with another of our episodes. Do you see, Utkarsh, how as we are going along, all our earlier episodes actually have a kind of, hook onto the next one and to many others, because everything is connected. All of it is a pattern of history. And we are studying that pattern in our own Indian subcontinent. So we spoke about Kublai Khan, we spoke about Genghis Khan, about Godan Khan, and the attack of the Mongols on Asia. And remember the map which we had seen. All of you who have not seen it, please go back to the episode on the Tibetans. I think it was just the episode before this, Utkarsh? Our episode on Tibet? The English one?
Yes, correct. It's
just
we had the Hindi episode, and before that we had the English one.
Yes. So then what happened when Genghis Khan, Godan Khan, and Kublai Khan overran Asia? A lot of Arabs Turks, Mongols, Mughals, who were all Muslim, had to run away from there. And if you cast your eyes back or mind back to the map of Asia, they are running away, they are crossing China, they are crossing Tibet, they are crossing Burma. Where do they arrive? They arrive in India. And you remember, India was not overrun by the Mongols. This is again one thing that we had focused on in that episode on Tibet. So India was not overrun, so it was a safe haven. So there were a lot of these foreign Muslim immigrants, you may call them today, who settled in Bengal, therefore raising the population yet more. Now, the third thing which was very important, especially for Bengal, was the Sufi movement. So Sufis are seen as this kind of, gentle face of Islam, who are the mystics, who have written, who have written beautiful poetry and talked about the God in a very different way, etc. And many people say, isn't it very syncretic? Because there are lots of similarities between the way Hindus think of the Almighty and the way Sufis think of them. So yes, so all this is very, very popular, and Sufi songs are really popular with Hindi films, extremely popular. But there is not, the Sufis were not such innocent people. They were a kind of, what can I say, a fifth column of Islamic invasion and conversion. They used to slip easily into populations, mix with them, and impress them with their own spirituality, with sometimes with tricks, sometimes with some kind of show of force. So it was like, what can I say? It was like very deceitful, and there was a lot of chicanery involved, and there was a lot of false spiritualism involved. And this gentle face of Islam was actually part of the sword of Islam. So, there are people, for example, there was a Sufi called Shah Jalal. So then Shah Jalal was a Sufi, but then one day he got very angry and he said, this king of Sylhet is very bad. So he just gathered an army, attacked the king of Sylhet, killed him, and converted the entire area to Islam. So the Sufis, however, have this very many different faces. And there are, in the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries, there are stories of many peers and fakirs. For example, there's the story of Satya Peer. Now, this Satya Peer is an attempt to co-opt and appropriate something which is called the Satyanarayan Katha in Hindu tradition. So you see, to get at a very devout Hindu population, what they did in the beginning was to mix the stories of Islam and Allah and Hinduism and Hindu concepts and come up with some kind of folk story which was very beloved by the people. So Satya Peer became a very, very beloved figure. And many kind of festivals and many things were done at the level of the common populace. Maybe there would be stories, singing, festivals, etc., to attract the Hindu population. Now, this is not what strict Islam believes in or allows. But this pattern is not only in Bengal. This pattern has also been seen in Southeast Asia. And when we move to Southeast Asia and see how Islam took over Southeast Asia, then we'll see the same thing happening. For example, the Ramayana was written as the Hikayat Sri Ram, where instead of Bhagwan, the name of Allah was substituted. So what was the idea? Stories, practices which were very beloved of the people were slowly appropriated by the Muslims through the Sufi movement. So this was yet another facet of the conversion to Islam. But the one which was very, very important was, of course, the financial coercion. So taxes, you've heard of the jizya. So this was a tax which was imposed only on Hindus. Then the second thing was that if there was a Hindu peasant and a Muslim peasant, then the taxes on the Hindu peasant would be much more. He would have to give up 50% of his produce, whereas the Muslim peasant would have to give up much less, maybe 20%. And do you know that during this time, they also placed taxes on Hindus bathing, shaving, things like that? So if you had a bath, if you shaved yourself, then you had to pay a tax. So
How
this
did they
was,
check
and
whether it
oh,
becomes
why
hot?
that's not, bathing was done in public places, Utkarsh.
Of course, yeah.
Or there was a
The-
well, or there would be a river. So it was not in
Hmm,
the privacy of your own house. It was done in
hmm,
public places. So therefore, you had to pay a lot of taxes if you were a Hindu. Now, the
hmm,
other thing we must remember is, where is this area? This is a very fertile area. And at the time of, say, between the 13th to the 16th, 17th centuries, a lot of places were being brought under cultivation. So there
hmm,
was a
hmm.
lot of tribal population also over there. So many of these Sufis led the tribal population into the wilderness. Whoever was the Nawab or the Sultan would grant that land to them, and all of those tribals would become Muslims because they would have to pay less taxes. So you can
Okay.
see how all these many pronged methods
Hmm.
really yielded results in terms of the change of population. Which is not to say that Hindus died out during this period, because if you remember your history, there is also the story of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu of Bengal during this time. Again, he was there in the 13th and 14th centuries, and it
Hmm.
led to a great upsurge of Hindu devotion. Then there were also small kings. Do you remember the first episode in which I explained the history of Durga Puja?
Yes.
In which we spoke of the courts of the kings in which Devi Puja and Durga Puja were developed. So that was also
Yeah.
happening around the same time. So,
I just have one question, which is linked to what you're saying. I understand all the factors you mentioned. The question that I have is, the Islamic invasion was start from the west to the east of the subcontinent, right? It was
hmm,
going on.
hmm.
Why is it that it was particularly successful in Bengal?
Yeah, I don't say that it was only particularly
Because
successful there, Utkarsh.
because if you
You
think if
look at the map. So when you see the map and you see the push to
hmm,
Bengal, remember that at that time, Bengal came up to Bihar. It was
okay,
not the Bengal you're thinking of. It
okay,
was also the Gangetic Plain,
hmm.
because Bengal then was what we today know as Bihar, West Bengal, and Bangladesh and Odisha.
So I'm also
All of it
Bengali,
was Bengal.
as
You
are
also
you.
are Bengali. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely. And during the time of the Palas and the Senas, we were all Bengali. So
Okay,
Bengal came up actually right to the Gangetic Plains. So it was not as tucked away in the east as it appears now.
okay,
So when Khilji came and made his push, then obviously, all this was happening in the Gangetic Plain. That was the most fertile area. That was the
hmm,
place which everyone wanted. Why was the Nawabi of Bengal or the presidency of Bengal so much in demand? Because the agricultural revenues were amazing from Bengal. Remember, it included Bihar. And
hmm.
that is the most fertile plain of the Ganges. So
Okay,
therefore, it is part of the same push. But you see, there was a pushback against the Islamic invasion. When I was reading my history books in school, it seemed, as if the Timurids or the Khiljis just waltzed in and did whatever they wanted, Muhammad bin Tughlaq. But it
hmm,
wasn't
hmm.
like that. There was a very big pushback. In fact, if you think about it, the Muslim invasion did not ever reach Assam
True. Yeah, you're right.
because they were pushed back. And we have to do,
Okay.
of course, that battle. I keep talking about it, and we have to do that Assamese battle, that greatest naval battle of all, one day,
Hmm.
of Pukan. But
Okay.
there was a pushback. The pushback happened to a greater or a lesser extent. And
Hmm. Hmm.
see, that is why all of India did not become, you and I are still Hindu, because there was a
Hmm.
pushback. Otherwise, you think of all the places where the armies of Islam overran.
Hmm.
Are there any original religions left? None. Absolutely none.
Yeah, I mean, Iran is a good example. I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah. Everyone had to run away and again come to
yeah.
India.
Hmm.
Yeah. So now this is the situation with the 3-4 pronged attack: conversion by force, conversion by financial push, conversion through trickery at the local populace level by Sufis, as also immigration to a large extent. So, at one point of time in 1872, a census was taken. Of the Muslim population, 70% was indigenous, but 30% was immigrants. So that was quite a really very big proportion. If you think of it, 30% was immigrants. No, so, and after that, we don't really want to go so much into British history, because I think everyone knows of the machinations around Bengal and the Battle of Plassey and
Of course,
Mir Jafar. Maybe one day we can do that separately, but today our topic is a
specific
little
episode.
different. Yeah. But today our topic is to focus on why Bangladesh has reached where it is and why West Bengal is almost following in its path. So you see, you spoke to me about population. So in 1881, when the 1872, actually the first census was done, and it was not a very successful one. In 1881, when they did another census over there, they found to their shock that 66% of the population was Muslim. Before this, the British had been under the very casual impression that, okay, there are a few Muslims there, but not too many. But it turned out that 66% of the population was Muslim in 1800 and 81. So there was a silent demographic explosion between the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, which was unnoticed because nobody bothered to take a census. In 1891, about 20 million Muslims, that is 33% of the total number of Muslims in India, they lived in East Bengal.
Okay.
Then we have to see the impact of this. Now, after the census figures came up, there was a rising up of Muslim leaders because they thought, okay, now we have the numbers. We can do something.
So that makes sense. Yeah,
yes.
Correct.
So in 1906, Muslim separatism was born in Dhaka. You associate the Muslim League with Pakistan, but it was born in 1906 in Dhaka.
So what you're saying is the availability of data.
In a way, yes.
The census is the reason why, because people are like, oh, I didn't know this. This is an opportunity for me to do something.
You can say that. You can definitely say that. It led to a kind of understanding amongst the leaders. Otherwise, Utkarsh, just think about it. We know of a whole number of leaders of the independence struggle, from Aurobindo Ghosh to Rabindranath to so many others from Bengal. So few of them are Muslims in the independence struggle. It was only it was basically the Muslim separatists who started coming into play after 1906 once they realized their power. So in 1906, the Muslim League was established in Dhaka. And between 1905 and 1947, there was a spate of communal riots. Now, there is a reason for this too. Because I did talk to you about the peers and fakirs and the so-called soft face of Islam. So if this was a soft faith, then where did all the killing, conversion, and violence and fanaticism come from? This was because from the 19th century, very, very radical types of Islam, which is Wahhabi Islam, Farazi Islam, Tariq-e-Muhammad movements, and all of these are, from the Indian subcontinent except the Wahhabis. So many of them from Rai Bareli. So these are very, very radical and very, very strict types of Islam. So they became very popular from the 19th century. Therefore, this whole idea that Muslims and Hindus cannot live in the same nation, they cannot be part of the same nation. This was born in Dhaka with the Muslim League. And to prove their point, or maybe, the idea of communal riots is not just to scare the other party, but also to do large-scale conversions. So between 1905 and 1947, there were about 10 terrible, terrible instances of riots in Bengal. I'll give you the names of some of them, but talk in detail only about two. So there was Maiman Singh, Pabna, Dhaka, Tipera, Noakhali, Chittagong, Bakarganj, Calcutta. There were terrible riots in all these places. There were attacks, and these attacks, unfortunately, the brunt was borne by Hindu women. The raping and dishonor of Hindu women was seen as the first thing to do by these rioters, these Muslim rioters, because they thought that was the best way to hurt the Hindu population. And after this, I mean, there's such terrible things that I feel so hesitant to even talk of them, but they must be talked of, because what they did was rape, convert, have children, and then all those children of Hindu women became Muslims. And those women had really no say in the matter. They had zero say in the matter. And how was this also done, Utkarsh? Hark back to another of our episodes, the one on beef. It was through feeding beef. It was through feeding beef to these women. And also a lot of.
So wait, if you are fed beef, then you're no longer Hindu?
So what happened was that, see, what is the situation? You've already been beaten and violated. After being beaten, violated, and whatever other violence is done, your house is burnt. Probably the husband is killed in front of you, children killed in front of you. And then you are fed beef, and then you are converted. So it's not just one little thing. It's a whole thing, of which this is a very important part. So, if somebody is sitting at a dining table in a fancy restaurant and eats a side of beef, then that's not the thing. That's not the point at all. This is a totally different kind of setup. But the idea of these riots, even then, was conversion and spreading fear amongst the Hindu population so that it would run away. So it was to convert, to change the demography, and they have succeeded really, really well. So I'll just talk about the Noakhali riots of 1946 and the Calcutta killings of 1946. There was an MLA called Peer Ghulam Sarwar in Noakhali in 1946. There was a pre-planned thing on the day of Kojagari before Diwali. They did the same thing: rape, convert, desecrate, and break temples and gurdwaras. So in Noakhali, there used to be 18% Muslims. It fell down to 5%. So when you're talking of population, remember, I'm giving you all these figures and all these changes. In Calcutta, in 1918 and 1926, there were terrible riots where in 1926, 100 people were killed and 1,500 were wounded. 11 temples and gurdwaras were desecrated. And how are these started? That you must not play any music because it is haram for Muslims. So there would be a dispute on music, or there would be a dispute on a procession. And these things happen even today. It's not as if this is over. So therefore, this bit of history is also what is happening today. In 1946, in Calcutta, in September, not September, it was not in September, it was in August, sorry, 16th August. This was called Direct Action Day. So you see, the call of the Muslim League. What do you remember about it?
This is 1946, right?
Yeah.
This is basically to prove to the British or to the world that Hindus and Muslims can't coexist together. So let's have a lot of violence.
Yeah.
That's my understanding of
exactly. Yes. This is what they did. And on Direct Action Day, 16th August, Hussain Suhrawardy, who was then the chief minister, he is called the Butcher of Bengal. He gave a call to just kill Hindus, direct action against Hindus.
Was it his doing or Jinnah's doing?
No. See, Jinnah was, till then, he was not absolutely the numero uno. He was the face of the Muslim League, but not only the numero uno. In fact, from my understanding and my reading, I would say both were hand in glove, but Suhrawardy was the one who actually directly did it.
Okay.
So he was the administrator. He was the chief minister of Bengal. He was the one who had to actually stop this rioting from happening, instead of which he encouraged it. Because of it, so many people were killed. The kind of numbers are about 10,000 people lost their lives, mostly Hindus. So whenever we think of partition, we think of Punjab and we think of those trains coming in full of dead bodies, we kind of forget Calcutta. And we should not forget Calcutta at all. After this, of course, but there was an interesting fight back from the Hindus. There's someone called Gopal Mukherjee, or Gopal Patha as he was called. And he did a counter movement to the extent that then the Sohrawadis of the world, the Muslim League, had to come to an agreement with him. And Utkarsh, this Direct Action Day was also to take Calcutta as part of Pakistan.
Oh.
So yes, they wanted Calcutta, like they wanted Kashmir to be part of Pakistan, Calcutta also had to be part of Pakistan. So it was Gopal Mukherjee or Gopal Patha who started this counter movement. And it was only because of him that the Muslim League desisted. And then they asked him also to desist, and he put his conditions as stop asking for Calcutta to be part of Pakistan. Otherwise, today it would not have been Dhaka that you would be hearing all this from or about these stories, but it would have been Calcutta. So then this happened in 1946, 47, then there was partition, all this killing, etc., etc. But it didn't end over there. It appears to me that there is an intent in that part of the country to just wipe it out, genocide all the Hindus. Because in the 40s, there was this wave of genocide. 1971, exactly the same thing happened again. And in the same places, Noakhali. And in Noakhali, barely 1% or 2% Muslims are left today. But yesterday, I was watching scenes of what is happening in Noakhali. The same thing again. Killing, lynching, raping, desecrating. You know that they've burned down the Dhakeshwari temple. So all the Shakti Peeths in Bangladesh, I don't know how many of them are still there. Dhakeshwari burned down 2 days ago. So in real time, we are watching the decimation of a 5 to 8,000 year old history of that period, of that place. People who have their roots there, who have been part of the soil, are being pushed out because of Islamization, because Hindus cannot be tolerated in that place anymore. It is a tragedy of the first order, and I do not understand the silence of the world. In my own capacity, along with a lot of other writers, we are presenting a petition, and we will be going public with that petition. But anyway, that's not the subject of this podcast. But this is what is happening again. In 1971, it was Yahya Khan, it was a Pakistani army. And by the way, I'm sure, I hope not. I hope you're not a great admirer of Kissinger, because I'm not. Kissinger more or less encouraged the genocide of Hindus. Have you come across that book called The Blood Telegram by Gary Bass?
I've heard about it. About it.
So this is the telegram sent by Archer Blood, who was the amazing name, no? Archer Blood.
Reminiscent.
So this was the telegram he sent to Kissinger because he was the consul general, explaining that Hindus were being massacred and killed and something should be done. And Kissinger didn't care about these bloody Hindus. He just wanted to get to China via Pakistan. Therefore, he colluded with what the Pakistani army was doing. So it seems to me that no matter what happens, it's the Hindus who get killed. Anything which is happening, the Islamic mentality of wiping out the Hindus seems to come into play. And Utkarsh, it's happening as we speak. People are being killed. As we speak, unspeakable things are being done to the Hindus of Bangladesh. It seems to be a pattern of history from the 20th century to remove from the demography anyone but those who follow Islam. So for that, I have another very interesting report. But before I move on to that, so what are your questions or reactions on all this?
I'm trying to think of questions or reactions. I think I've been asking you them along the way. Yeah, I mean, I only had a tangential question, but I think that'll get us very, very deeply into Western politics.
Hmm.
In the
That it
West,
will.
there is a lot of uh, a hue and cry on, say, what's happening in Gaza, right? On the side of the
Yes.
folks of
Yes.
Gaza.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Yes.
so on the other hand, you have another genocide, and it's not only the genocide happening in Bangladesh. I mean, yeah. So why is it? Why, what is the again? This will get us into it's not a history topic, right? Maybe we could do it at a different time. But then
Hmm.
it's worth examining why is there a double standard in the
Yes,
coverage?
I know it's really not a topic of history, and
Yeah,
we're not a kind of current affairs podcast, but
yeah,
we must
yeah,
just discuss it in 2 minutes. It's the
yeah.
hypocrisy of the world. And do you know what the New York Times wrote day before yesterday? That Hindus are being killed because of revenge. So the Muslims are taking revenge on Hindus. For what? For voting for Hasina. Now, if voting for a person you don't like is a crime and you'll get killed for that, what's democracy all about? And this is our friend, the New York Times. Just give me a minute. Sorry. So the hypocrisy is crazy. The hypocrisy is because of geopolitics. It's because the Americans don't see India as being as pliable as Pakistan. They use Pakistan for their own geopolitical aims, use it when they want,
Hmm,
dump it when they want. Pakistan has really, it's like a puppet in the hands of the US.
hmm,
India
hmm,
is not going to be a puppet. So I
hmm,
think this is also, in a way, trying to teach India a lesson. Because, destabilizing the Indian subcontinent as this interference is doing,
hmm,
I don't know how far it's a good idea. Look at the destabilization of Iraq, which was a bulwark in the Middle East, and
hmm,
then
hmm,
look at the history of the past 20, 25 years.
hmm,
So,
hmm, hmm.
what the Americans do, maybe they themselves don't know what they do. Somebody who came from Harvard is 25 years old, has never left Boston, wrote a wonderful PhD on something, and the State Department acted on it. So that's not a joke. This happens.
This happened. Yeah.
Yeah, all this happens. So geopolitics again, Utkarsh, it's one of my favorite topics. I write a lot of papers on that. Maybe we should start a separate podcast on geopolitics. But
Yeah.
right now, well, we do know that there is a lot of geopolitics involved because this is the playground for US and China.
Yeah.
And both of
Hmm,
them do not like India, but the US wants to use India against China. And China uses Pakistan against India. US uses Pakistan against India. And now it will use Bangladesh against India. But look at the Indian subcontinent. India is this bulwark of stability. Otherwise, this entire subcontinent would be up in flames. Look at
hmm.
Pakistan, Afghanistan, Burma, Myanmar, and now Bangladesh. Look at what's happening. So this is something that is part of that great game again, which we discussed in relation to Tibet. So in
Hmm,
that great game, some of the pawns and some of the kings and queens have changed, but of course the game goes on.
hmm,
But
hmm, hmm.
Utkarsh, you know what? There was something I really wanted to put forward here
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
this is something current, and this is actually a very, very wonderful report prepared by Professor Shamika Ravi. And I'm going to show you that report. And I just want you to see how demography has changed. What
Hmm,
has
hmm.
happened to the population in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh? So today we'll just look at Bangladesh and India because, well, the other countries we can look at some other time. Let me share it.
Hmm.
So can you see this page? I'm going to come to the correct.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see.
Yeah. So again, this is a map. Can you see this map
Yeah.
clearly? Okay. So Shamika Ravi and another professor have looked at religious population data from across the world, and they have concentrated in on the subcontinent. Now I can tell
Hmm.
you that this was 50% became 60%, etc., etc. That's all very confusing. I think she's put it in a very good way.
I understood what it is basically. It's
Yeah,
the rate
yeah.
of change of the demographic. It's very high in Bengal area.
No,
It's
and
slightly high.
also the rate of change in majority. So it has fallen in Myanmar. Buddhists have fallen. In India, Hindus have fallen. In Nepal, Hindus have fallen. Look at Pakistan, the majority, which is Muslims, has risen by 4%. And look at Bangladesh. Muslim population has risen by almost 19%. So this is what is the result of all this conversion, killing, pushing out. This is the result of what has been happening in Bangladesh. Then let me look, see. In 1950, Muslims were 76% of the population in East Pakistan, that is Bangladesh. Hindus were 23. Buddhists and Christians were 0.6 and 0.17. So in 2015, Hindus became 8%. 66% decrease in a world where minorities on an average increased by 22% globally. So you see the demographic shock that the Hindu population in Bangladesh has been subjected to over 50 to 2015. Other minorities, Buddhists remain stable at 0.63 and Christian population tripled to 0.53. So this seems to be some kind of animus against Hindus in particular. Now we will just for a minute compare it with India. In India, share of majority Hindu population decreased by 7.82%. Whereas the share of Muslim population increased from 9 to 14, which is a 43% increase in their share. So I don't want to throw too many numbers. It's not. So much
the
fun.
Implications are clear. Implications are very, very clear.
And I'm not making it up.
Again, I have a lot of reservations about the way the CCP or the Chinese government run their country. But they are very, very successful in insulating their country to some extent against foreign interference.
That's right.
And managing the demography of the country in a way that suits their needs, which I may or may not agree with. I'm just talking about their control.
But Utkarsh, isn't it the same thing that they do? I mean, the Hans are increasing like crazy. And in places like Tibet, the Hans are increasing like crazy. It's exactly the same thing as Myanmar. You just substitute Hans with Muslims.
No, and again, so what I'm trying to say is, I'm not saying adopt the Chinese approach because it's an approach that is actually disseminating minorities. I'm not saying that. Nobody wants to do that.
Yes.
Not at all. That is we talked about this in the Tibet thing, right? What a tragedy it is what's happening in Tibet.
In Tibet, they're also sending them to these re-education schools, as you said.
But all I'm saying is the CCP has a degree of control over their geography, which
and
I think India
let's put it this way.
That's all I'm saying.
China is looking after Chinese interests. We may not agree with those Chinese interests, but it is looking after Chinese interests.
It is looking after them. Exactly.
Yes. We are unable to look after India's interests.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was saying.
We are unable to look after India's interests because, see, this radicalized, perhaps again, East Pakistan on our doorstep is an issue we cannot ignore. So, in the Northeast, we have had a lot of successes in the last 10-15 years because we've had a lot of cooperation with Bangladesh. So the insurgencies in the Northeast, you will notice, have almost died. It's only, again, the Kukis and the Meiteis in Manipur, which are being fanned by the Chinese. And that also has this little Bangladesh, Myanmar, India kind of angle, because there is this fictitious group called Zo. They say they are going to make a Zoram, which is all the Kukis and Meiteis and Christian tribes of that area. So this is what Sheikh Hasina was saying when he said that America wants to make a place like Timor-Leste, a Christian majority state in the middle, using areas from India, Bangladesh and Myanmar. So perhaps she has been punished for that. There are in Bangladesh itself, say, less than 1% of so many of these tribes. So they still exist over there, but they are very small in number, less than 1%. They are the Chakma, Santhals, Tripuris, Khasis, Vishnupriya Manipuris, Kukis, Garos, all of them are also in India. And these tribes are also there in Myanmar. So this whole area is in many ways very similar. So you see, Utkarsh, it has been artificially cut into pieces with a very bloody knife. So all these things are going to happen. This was one place. For thousands of years, it was one. It's only been in the last century, perhaps, and in the last 60, 70 years that it has been cut into pieces. So it's going to bleed. It's going to bleed very badly. But Bangladesh, I await developments, hoping against hope that things will settle down, that the Hindu minority will not be targeted, because there is a history of Bangladesh, which is not just the history of Bangladesh, it is also the history of India. And that is why we are talking about it today on our VAC Indian History podcast.
Indian history.
Yeah. That's why we are talking about it. That's the reason. But it's, Utkarsh, it's a really sad moment. It's a tragic moment. And very honestly, I do not think there is any hope for Hindus in Bangladesh. From 8%, they are going to go down to 0%. We saw this happening in Afghanistan, where the last Hindu and the last Sikh had to leave. This is going to happen in Bangladesh. Whether or not we can stop it from happening in India depends on us.
Yeah.
So this has been, in fact, actually a very sad podcast.
Yeah, somber episode.
Very somber episode. But such is the situation that it is somber. And anyone who's listening to this, please raise your voice for the violence against Hindus in Bangladesh. Please raise your voice. I myself will be signing and releasing that petition. Everyone, please raise your voice. Pressure works. Look at, the way other marginalized minorities, if there is violence against them, the world stands up for them. Let us also stand up for the minority Hindus of Bangladesh.
Okay, should we end it here?
Yes, I think so. It's been a somber episode. I'm ending with this appeal to stand up for the Bangladeshi Hindus, and let us see. Let us hope that by the time we are with you next time, there will be some better news to report. And of course, we'll be back with some other very interesting topic. And remember, you see, how does history impact on the modern day? I told you a lot about what happened in history, and see how it's actually not history, but current affairs, geopolitics.
Yeah. All right, folks, we'll see you next time. Hopefully with a slightly more upbeat.
Yes, we'll try to do something different next time.
Yeah. All right. Take care.